Here's your 10-minute warning. Big Ten TED Live starts in 10 minutes. Welcome, Big Ten fans. This is Big Ten Ted Live. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Big Ten Ted Live. What an off-season it has been so far. In any offseason nowadays in college football, what do you get? You get a lot of player movement. You know, you get that early signing period where you bring in a lot of excitement in December about the future. But then as you kind of migrate towards January, you get excited about the right here or the right now, because that's what this episode of Big Ten Ted Live is all about. It's all about the transfers, because that first transfer portal period window has shut. It's come to a close. And for the most part, a lot of kids have committed, and we kind of know the winners, the losers, the have-nots from the first transfer portal period window. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The first transfer portal period window. Which teams came out on top? Which teams really improved themselves? Okay, we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about players on both sides of the coin. Okay, we're going to talk about players that are going to step up and be big-time impact players that are transferring in, new transfers this season in 2023. We'll talk about that. Which players do I think are going to be those players that are going to help their teams in big ways in 2023? We're also going to talk the other side of the coin, because the transfer portal giveth, but it also taketh away. And we're going to focus on the taketh away. What are going to be some of the bigger departures from Big Ten programs in 2023? So we'll talk about all of that here during today's show. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in here to Big Ten Ted Live. Going to go through some quick housekeeping before we get into the show here tonight. If you're so inclined, sometimes it does. The chat gets a lot of comments in there. One way to stand out and support the channel is via a super chat as well. So just hit the $sign right below the live chat. That is a great way to support the channel and get your comment noticed as well. Also, if you haven't already, Twitter is a great place to find me as well. At Big Ten Ted on Twitter. A lot of news on there. A lot of stuff that I might not cover on the YouTube side. You might see on the Twitter side as well. So make sure you follow over there. So let's get right into it. The transfer portal giveth, and the transfer portal taketh away. Which teams improved themselves and really bolstered their status going into 2023 via this first transfer portal window? Okay? Because there are some teams that really went out and really made a big-time difference to really improve their team and maybe vault them to a division championship status, maybe even a conference championship status in 2023. The first team I want to focus on is the Wisconsin Badgers. Okay, if you've been watching this channel lately, you know how much I love what Wisconsin has been doing. Since Luke Fickell has been named the head coach, he's been doing business. Whether it's been the coaching staff, of course, I've been in love with the Phil Longo hire, and you'll hear that name maybe a couple of times here in this video, right? Bringing in Mike Tressel as his defensive coordinator from Cincinnati. You could go up and down the coaching staff list. He's bringing in a really good coaching staff to Madison, Wisconsin. And he's also bringing in a lot of players that are going to turn Wisconsin around, and they're going to turn Wisconsin around very quickly. Okay, you got to start with the quarterback position, because when you talk about impact players, when you talk about what really improves your team, you got to have a good quarterback. You got to have good quarterback play in college football to really take it to the next level. Wisconsin didn't get one. They didn't get two. They got three quarterbacks. So they've really got, and don't forget about that quarterback, the high school guy that they're able to bring in as well. So they've got the quarterback position on lockdown for the next 3 to 4 years. When is the last time you heard that about the University of Wisconsin? All right, Badger fans, you've been dealing with the John Stockos, the Scott Tolzienes, the Alex Hornerbrooks, where you're going to get average quarterback play now, like Nick Evers, a guy from Oklahoma that they brought in. That's a 4-star quarterback talent. These are top 100 nationally in their high school classes type of talent. That's what you have at quarterback, and you have an offensive coordinator that has a proven track record of bringing the most out of that talent. Look at the last 2 quarterbacks that Phil Longo has coached. Sam Howell, who put up big numbers, and Drake May, who may be a Heisman contender in 2023, and maybe the best young quarterback in all of college football. You put it all together, and Wisconsin is in a great spot because it all starts at the quarterback position. Like, I put out a video ranking the quarterbacks right now 1 through 14 in the Big Ten Conference. I put Tanner Mordecai as number 3, right behind J.J. McCarthy and Taulia Tagovailoa. It would not be any surprise at all if Tanner Mordecai finds himself at numero uno, at number 1 at some point during the 2023 Big Ten football season. I think he's that good. You look at his numbers, you look at his tape at SMU, and now you bring in an offensive coordinator that can get the most out of you. Now you bring in wide receivers, which I'll get to in just a minute. You bring in a lot of talent around you. That's going to be a pretty good recipe for success in Madison, Wisconsin. Let's talk about those wide receivers because they needed to bolster it. I thought their wide receiving core was pretty good with Chemre Dike, Skylar Bell, Keontae Lewis. I'll stay at that. I'll stay at pretty good. But the additions that they've made at the wide receiver position have taken them from pretty good to one of the best wide receiving cores in the Big Ten. Once again, that's another video that I put up pretty recently. Go check it out on the channel. You look at C.J. Williams. He was a top 100 guy in his high school class a year ago when he came out and he committed to USC. This last year as a freshman at USC, didn't get a ton of time on the field because they were, as well, pretty loaded in the wide receiver room over there. So now you bring in a guy, C.J. Williams, a long, lanky, go-up-and-get-it type of wide receiver. Maybe unproven, but the talent is there to make him into one of the best receivers on this team. And then you look at a proven commodity in Bryson Green, the transfer from Oklahoma State. I really believe this guy, is going to be a star this season. This guy, I think it's going to be him and Chemre Dike that are really going to break out, and maybe both of them, one maybe or the other as well, is going to have a 1,000-yard receiving season. Because you can't take what Wisconsin and the numbers Wisconsin receivers have done in the past. You got to look at maybe what North Carolina receivers have done in the past, because this is a new offense and this is a brand new style of play. Wisconsin changing philosophy, all right? And a lot of times when you make a coaching change and you change philosophy nowadays, you need to go into the transfer portal. And you need to go into the transfer portal to find the players to fit what you want to do. Wisconsin has done a great job of that. They are a top 10 transfer class in the country, the top transfer class in the Big Ten right now. Let's talk about the University of Michigan. Michigan's a great team. Back-to-back Big Ten titles, back-to-back appearances in the college football playoff. They're a great team. What do they need the transfer portal for, right? There's multiple ways that teams can approach the transfer portal. I just talked about Wisconsin, right? Coaching change, new system, got to bring in a bunch of new players. Michigan is probably how you should approach the transfer portal, right? You recruit at a top 10 level, and say what you want about Michigan's recruiting as of late. But you recruit at a high level, and then you use the transfer portal to plug the holes that you have on your team. And that's exactly what Michigan is doing right here, right now. Michigan has been an offensive line juggernaut the past few years. Back-to-back winners of the Joe Moore Award as the top offensive line in the country in all of college football. And what do? They go out and they reload on the offensive line. You get guys like a Miles Hinton. You get guys like Drake Nugent, both of those guys from Stanford. You look at Ladarius Henderson on the interior. All of those guys, Power 5 experience in the Pac-12. They're going to be able to come in. Now, I'm not saying, they're going to play at a level, an All-American type of level like an Olu Oluwatimi, right? Sometimes better. Some linemen, of course, are better than others. Some players are better than other players. But this is still going to be a really good offensive line. Michigan knows who they are. And that's what this transfer portal class told me, is we need to retool on the positions that are important to us. Offensive line is very important to Michigan. This is a Michigan team that's built from the inside out. This is a Michigan team that wants to be physical. It all starts with their offensive line. Great job in the transfer portal retooling that with these 3 guys. What else is Michigan good at? They're good at defense. Okay, Ernest Hausman, the transfer from Nebraska. You watch kind of the last half of that Nebraska football season. Ernest Hausman was not only transforming into maybe one of their better linebackers after they were kind of injured up on that side of the ball, the Huskers were, but man, in terms of the whole defense, in terms of the whole unit, Ernest Hausman was turning into one of the better players on that unit for the University of Nebraska. So him coming into Michigan, him being a part of this program is going to be a big deal because you look at how Michigan has developed their elite defenders. You look at a guy like an Aiden Hutchinson, like a Chase Winovich. You look at those types of guys, they can take them to the next level and be first round, second round, those types of guys, NFL draft picks. Ernest Hausman is still a young kid. It was his true freshman season last year at Nebraska. And he just, as the more playing time and the more repetitions he got, he continued to get better and better and better. A couple of 10-tackle games towards the end of the season for Ernest Hausman. And he's going to take that his talent level to the next level, I believe, at the University of Michigan. How about Josiah Stewart as well? Transfer from Coastal Carolina. This is a guy that's going to come off the edge, right? You talk about maybe the interior at linebacker. You're going to see Ernest Hausman, maybe with Junior Colson. Look at the outside. Now, no disrespect to Mike Morris or any of those guys in this pass rush, but maybe it wasn't quite at the level that it was in 2021. Josiah Stewart could be a guy to bring that back to Michigan, to bring that vaunted pass rush back. He had 13 sacks in his freshman season in 2021 at Coastal Carolina. Okay, this is a guy that can get after it. He's got the size to give people trouble on the exterior. He's got the speed to give him trouble on the interior. You can line him up at a variety of spots on the defensive line. Okay, offensive line, defense. That's where Michigan is at their best. That's what kind of a football team they are. They use the transfer portal to recoup at those 2 areas. Love it. Love what the University of Michigan did there. Let's talk about Nebraska. Okay, because when we talk about retooling your football team, I talked about that with Wisconsin a little bit earlier, right? Wisconsin is going from ground and pound I formation. Let's throw big old 45 Matt Bernstein at fullback and let him plow the way. And they're going to the air raid and they're spreading it out and they're looking to put points and yards on the board. You look at Nebraska, spread it out, Scott Frost type of system. Now they're reining it in. They're getting back to what Nebraska is known for. Powerful football, interior football, physicality, meanness. We're the big boys. That kind of a deal. So when you take a look at what Nebraska has done, their class is all about potential. Okay, if they hit on half of these guys, which you're going to hit and miss on some of these transfers, you hit on half of these guys, Nebraska will still be sitting in a really good spot. And I believe that they've made it known that they want to be better on defense and they want to be better on the interior. I think one guy that might not get a lot of press that I think is going to be a key part for Nebraska on the inside of their offensive line is Ben Scott, the transfer from Arizona State. It's the second time I've talked about an Arizona State offensive lineman, so I'm not sure what was going on up there, but seems like they had a pretty good offensive line in Tempe. But with Ben Scott coming in, I think he's going to anchor that offensive line and make it better on the interior. But you look at some other guys that are coming in for Nebraska, like you look at MJ Sherman, former 5-star from Georgia, a lot of SEC kids that didn't get their playing time or whatever, weren't happy for one reason or another. Highly recruited kids. MJ Sherman. Of course, we're going to talk about Eric Gilbert because, man, I believe Eric Gilbert has the potential to be one of the best targets in the entire Big Ten next season. Okay, you look at his tape from 2020 at LSU. Remember, that was coming off the year where they lost a bunch of talent. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. If you watch NFL football now, those names are pretty familiar. Those are NFL superstars. In 2020, 35 catches, 368 yards for Eric Gilbert. This is a guy that if he can get his head straight with his off-the-field stuff, this is a guy that has all the tools, the size. He has the speed. He can line up in the slot. He can line up at tight end. I believe this is a guy that could take Nebraska's offense to the next level. There's no question about that. But, and I'm going to talk about the rest of Nebraska's transfer class, but maybe some of their biggest transfers, I guess, if you want to call them that, are the guys that didn't transfer, the guys that entered the portal, but Matt Rule was able to bring them back. Xavier Betts and Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, right? Those are two receivers that I think are big-time targets, right? Xavier Betts didn't play the season. He kind of opted out of the team, so to speak, in March. Middle of the season type of thing for Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. Those are two receivers that I think are big-time and can have big-time breakout seasons for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. But Matt Rule wants to be good on defense. He wants to make that a priority. I look a lot of these guys from the SEC, highly recruited, lots of stars. I look at Chief Borders. I look at Elijah Judy. I look at Corey Collier. Of course, I mentioned MJ Sherman before. They are loading up on a lot of this 4- and 5-star talent from the SEC. And if they can, like I said, if they can hit on half of these guys, right? You look at Judy, you look at Sherman, you look at Borders, defensive line, linebackers. You hit on half of them, and I think you're going to have a pretty good season at Nebraska. They've really hit the transfer portal hard, and you need to really retool a program because you can rebuild a program a lot faster than you could before. There's no question about that. And, of course, we got to talk about Jeff Sims at quarterback. I think he provides a dual threat that's going to make things awfully scary. I would love to see read option type of things with Jeff Sims and A.J. Allen and Anthony Grant in the backfield. Nebraska is putting it all together at a lot of positions, and I think there's a lot of diversity in what they're doing. Like when you look at what Scott Frost did in the transfer portal, he was very focused on skill positions. But I think Matt Rule is doing it on defense, he's doing it on the interior, and he's doing it at the skill positions as well. So diversity in the transfer portal is very good as well. But last thing on Nebraska, lots of potential. Can this coaching staff take these transfers and turn it into something? Can they take these guys who we know are talented? We know going to schools like Florida, Georgia, A&M, whatever. We know they're talented. Can it be transferred to the next level? Can it be transferred to the Big Ten? That's what we want to know. I'm going to finish things off in terms of the teams with Minnesota. Okay, a lot of people have been talking about the teams that I just mentioned. Like, I've been talking about Wisconsin, Nebraska, Michigan ad nauseum. But you look a little bit deeper at Minnesota, and this was a team that was in the Big Ten West race for the last few years, and you really saw the development of Ethan Kaliakmanis towards the end of the season. Okay? And you saw this guy, I think, has a little something in terms of throwing the football. This guy can put it in the air. This guy can make things happen. And, now with the guy like a John Michael Schmitz and some guys on their offensive line that are going to be leaving, you take a look at Muhammad Ibrahim, the best running back in Minnesota history, that is leaving. This was a team that was focused on running the football. But as we move forward with the new coordinators to 2023, I think this is a Minnesota team that could get a lot more explosive. Because if you look at the guys that they've got coming in the transfer portal, things might be looking pretty good for the Golden Gophers. Okay, I want to focus first on the receivers because you bring back Chris Ottman-Bell. Okay, that's a big thing for the Gophers. You got Michael Brown-Stevens. You got Brevin Spann-Ford. You got the hyphenated all-stars, right, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And then you bring in guys like Corey Crooms, 11 touchdowns combined the last 2 seasons at Western Michigan, a couple of times all-MAC performer. Okay, then you bring in Elijah Spencer from the University of Charlotte, over 900 yards, 12 touchdowns. I believe Elijah Spencer is going to be a guy that's going to come in and maybe be 1-2 with Chris Ottman-Bell in that receiving core. Okay, they've got a lot of depth, and I think they've got a lot of talent. I think I'm going to see Corey Crooms. I'm going to see Elijah Spencer rise up the depth chart. And then you're going to see a guy like a Michael Brown-Stevens fit into the role that I think he was meant to be. I don't know if he was meant to be a number 2 or maybe a number 3. Okay, he's meant to be that third option, that fourth option in the slot that can get you key first downs. I didn't also mention Lamecki Brockington. I didn't mention Dalen Wright. There's a lot of depth in this receiving core. But that's receiving. I think the biggest impact player for Minnesota is going to come from the running back position. That's right. A year after losing Muhammad Ibrahim, it's a transfer running back that I think is going to come in and follow. He's not going to completely fill the footsteps. Okay, he's not going to do that. But what he is going to do is bring some balance to this Minnesota offense. I look at Sean Tyler. Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons at Western Michigan. This is a guy that's very explosive. Okay, Sean Tyler is going to be able to step in. And, the reason why I say confidently that I think he's going to step in very well at Minnesota is because when Mohamed Ibrahim was out last year, you had Trey Potts and Bryce Williams and guys. I just didn't really see that much in terms of the depth of the running back position for Minnesota. When Mohamed Ibrahim went out, this team really suffered. Okay, you need talent in the backfield. I believe P.J. Fleck said we need more talent in the backfield. And boy, he's going back to his roots, going back to Western Michigan, going back to Kalamazoo to really improve this football team. Who do you guys think really improved their football team via the transfer portal in this first window? Leave your thoughts in the comments below because, man, this transfer portal window had a lot of movement. Very exciting for teams in the Big Ten Conference. Yeah, this was a great, I think, transfer period for Big Ten teams. You saw programs like a Wisconsin. You saw a program like a Nebraska really go in and retool their football team. Okay, I really believe, I'm not going to sit here and say like a team like Nebraska is going to go out and they're going to win. I thought they were going to win 8 games last year. I thought they did enough last season to really put forth a good team. But hey, when you got Scott Frost, you got Scott Frost. Okay, that's it, right? Frost's gonna frost. But I've been watching a lot of Matt Rule conversation. I've been watching a lot of Matt Rule interviews. I saw his Bussin' with the Boys interview with Will Compton, and I just think this guy means business. All the moves that he's kind of put forth, and all the moves, coaching staff and otherwise, that Matt Rule and all the stuff. I know, son of a preacher man. I know this guy's a good talker. Okay, and the results prove that he can rebuild a football program. But I just think something feels a little bit different at Nebraska because the more I kind of saw this Scott Frost tenure to continue to go by, I saw a team that wasn't tough. Okay, and it took Mickey Joseph as interim head coach a little bit to really try to install some more toughness in this Nebraska program. Okay, and Matt Rule, I think, is installing toughness, especially on defense. Like I mentioned those defensive players that Nebraska's bringing in. I think Nebraska's going to be really good on defense this season. And they were solid. I shouldn't say they were solid last year. I think entering the season, they looked like they were going to be solid, but it just didn't pan out that way. I like Nebraska. Wisconsin's an interesting one because I think talent-wise, they've brought in the best talent, really, out of any of these transfer classes. Can it all come together? That's the big thing. That's really the question you ask out of any transfer class. Can it come together? Can these guys come together, form a system? There's so much newness at both Wisconsin and Nebraska, right? You've got a little bit. I know there's been some changes at Iowa, at Minnesota, at Illinois, and stuff like that. But this is going to be a really deep Big Ten West. And, man, Wisconsin and Nebraska really hit home on their coaching hires. What are we going to see out of a program like in Iowa? What are we going to see out of a program like in Illinois, like a Purdue? Are those Wisconsin and Nebraska teams going to bypass those programs? I think Purdue is going to take a step back this season. I really do. I think it's going to be tough for the Boilermakers. Like that 8-4 season, it seemed like was a ceiling type of deal for the Purdue Boilermakers. That's the way it seemed to me. It seems like Purdue is a program that goes from 5-7 to 8-4. That's just how I feel about that particular program. Okay, that's just where I'm at about the Purdue Boilermakers. And you look at them historically. Look at Purdue through the Joe Tiller years. Go look it up. Go to Wikipedia. And you look at the Joe Tiller years, and some of their best seasons was 8 wins, was 9 wins. I know they went to the Rose Bowl in 2000 with Drew Brees, but it's Drew Brees. That was kind of their once-in-a-lifetime quarterback for the Boilermakers. And I'm not sitting here, and I don't mean to rag on Purdue, but it's going to be tough. Because although Ryan Walters is a young, unproven head coach, and when you look at what Wisconsin has done, when you look at what Nebraska has done, when you look at what Iowa and Minnesota already are, I think it's going to be tough for the Purdue Boilermakers to stand out and really be a big-time program going forward. They need to provide Hudson Card with a number one wide receiver. I don't think they have it with TJ Sheffield or a Mershawn Rice or a Sawinski. I just don't see that happening right now. Okay, so that's where I stand on that. Let's see. We continue to kind of look through. Dave Valensky chiming in on basketball. Northwestern. I've been following basketball kind of out of the corner of my eye this year. I think that the deal for me and basketball, the relationship between me and basketball right now is I'm a busy guy in the winter. I work Tuesday nights, I work Thursday nights, I work a lot of weeknights, which is when a lot of these basketball games are going on. Like during the fall, don't work Saturday. I might work the occasional Saturday, but I don't work Saturdays. So that's why, football usually works out better for me. But I've been watching Big Ten basketball out of the corner of my eye. And what I saw, one Big Ten team is ranked right now. It's Purdue. That's crazy to me. Beginning of the year, I really thought Indiana would be a team that would be good for a lot of the year. I watched them earlier on, and I was able to catch them in that non-conference game against North Carolina. And like I said, I can't speak to exactly why things aren't going the way they should be for Indiana or really any other school. But we know year in and year out, this is an extremely deep Big Ten conference as it pertains to basketball. Look at Northwestern, as Dave points out here. You look at Penn State, right, with Jalen Pickett at guard. These are teams that could maybe make some runs in the NCAA tournament. Rutgers, okay? Here's kind of an opinion I have about Rutgers. Really, I know it's technically about basketball, but it's really about their athletic department as a whole. Rutgers is probably never going to be good at football. I'm sorry, but that's just how I feel. They're never going to be good at football, and that's okay. Okay, they might make bowl games. They might go 7-5. Cool, great, awesome. But really, I think the more time that goes by, Rutgers is going to establish themselves as a basketball school, right? They're in a basketball hub. They're right next to New York City. There's a lot of talent that comes out of that area, New York, New Jersey type of area up there on the basketball side of things. I believe the more time that goes by, Rutgers is going to continue to be really good on the basketball side of things. And that's how some schools are. Like, look at Kansas historically. Football, like they had that great year with Todd Reesing where they went to the Orange Bowl. But overall, Kansas is not a good football program. And that's fine. You need different schools to stand out. How boring would it be if Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State would win? How boring would it be if they won football, if they won volleyball, if they won hockey, if they won basketball? No. We kind of need some diversity throughout the different sports in the Big Ten Conference, and I think that's very important. Minnesota, powerhouse on the men's hockey side of things as well. Maybe not in other sports, like look at where Minnesota is in the basketball side of things. So I think you need some diversity in terms of kind of your conference and in terms of the teams inside of your conference as well. So although I'm not able to really take in a lot of basketball, I'm keeping an eye on it out of the corner of my eye. I might be doing a show right after Selection Sunday to kind of give my live reaction of the Sunday selection picks, how I think each team's going to do in the NCAA tournament, because I love March Madness more than a lot of things. March Madness, I think, is one of the greatest spectacles in sports. I think you could put it up there with, you've got the Olympics, you've got the Super Bowl. I think you could throw March, I'm not saying they're on that level, but you could throw March Madness somewhere-ish around that level as well. We're talking about scholarships here in the comment with John Hamilton saying Nebraska is 15 over the 85 scholarship limit. That's crazy. right now. Yeah, this is what happens. This is what happens when you bring in a lot of talent. I don't know if I've said this publicly. I always thought 85 was too much. I always thought they should go down to 75 scholarships. I always think now with the transfer portal, it doesn't matter. Okay, the reason why I thought 85 scholarships was too much was because you get a lot of over recruiting. And when kids are they feel locked in, right? When they, before the transfer portal, when they had to sit out a year, go to junior college, whatever, they feel kind of locked in. But now with the transfer portal, kids can move around. So maybe the scholarship limit doesn't really mean as much in terms of that anymore, in terms of over recruiting. Because if you over recruit a bunch of kids, look at Texas A&M, right? They over recruit, they sign the best class in the country. Half of the kids then end up going in the portal the next year. So, it doesn't mean as much anymore. Dennis Young asks, can they just cancel a scholarship? Look what happened to that Florida kid with the NIL deal. I think it takes kind of both parties to deal with a canceled scholarship, so to speak. Should be interesting to see what happens there. We're going to move on here today in the program. So we talked about the teams that have really done a great job in terms of transfers. I want to talk about impact players. There's a lot of really good impact players coming into the Big Ten Conference this season via the transfer portal in this first transfer portal window. I want to talk about some of those players that are going to be impact performers in 2023 and maybe could take their team to a championship level. First one I'm going to talk about is Tanner Mordecai. I've talked about him till I'm blue in the face, or maybe I should say red in the face right now. But Tanner Mordecai, we all know when we talk about impact players on a football team, it's about the quarterback. It's about the quarterback position. And Tanner Mordecai right now is about you, not just in the Big Ten, but you look all across college football, and he's as impact as it gets from some of these transfers because of his position, because of the system that he's going in with Phil Longo and his system right now. Okay? I think it's the combination of everything, because I'm going to point out some impact players here. But it doesn't necessarily mean these are the four best transfers. I just think you got to take of what these teams have coming back, what they got coming in, just the whole complete package. When I look at the whole complete package and I look at Tanner Mordecai, he's got a really good situation he's going in, and with the receivers they have coming in, the system they have, and just what he is. He was playing at one of the better G5 teams, I think, in the last couple of years at SMU. Now, of course, they never made the New Year's Six. They didn't break through to win a conference championship, but they were always right there, got ranked a few times, and Tanner Mordecai was a big reason because of that. Tanner Mordecai is going to come in and he could be the top quarterback in the Big Ten halfway through the season. That would not surprise me at all. If Michigan is running the ball a lot, we don't see a lot of J.J. McCarthy. Talia Tagovailoa, right, he's been banged up. He's been inconsistent. Why couldn't Tanner Mordecai raise to be, especially the system he's in, the track record that Phil Longo has? I think he could come in and be a big-time player as maybe the number one quarterback in the Big Ten. Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty impactful transfer. I'm going to move on to another guy. Sean Tyler, a running back transfer out of Western Michigan who's transferring to Minnesota. He's looking to pick up where Muhammad Ibrahim left off in this offense. Okay, this was an offense at Minnesota that ran the ball a lot last season. A lot. Okay, I think they're going to be more balanced this season. But you're looking at Sean Tyler that's coming off back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons at Western Michigan. This is a guy that can pop off a big run. This is a guy, when he touches the football, I think he can take it to the house. That's what I saw on film from his stuff at Western Michigan. I still think that they're going to have a good offensive line. I'm not going to say they're going to lose a bunch of guys and all of a sudden this is going to be a pass-blocking team. This is still going to be a team that's going to be good in run blocking. They're going to look to go downhill. Minnesota is still going to be good up front. And this is going to be more of a balanced team. Maybe more of a look of that so wonderful 2019 team that was able to run the ball. And of course, Tanner Morgan was able to throw it to those great future NFL wide receivers. But Sean Tyler, I believe, will provide some balance to this offense. Wouldn't surprise me to see him break out and maybe get to maybe a top 5 Big Ten running back when all is said and done. Ernest Hausman talked about how he was one of the best Nebraska defenders as the season kind of came along. It really opened my eyes and say all Ernest Hausmann needed was reps. Because the more reps that he got towards the end of the season at Nebraska, the better he became. That's it. That's the list. Okay, Michigan is known for getting a lot of development out of their great defensive players. I think Ernest Hausmann is going to be the next in line out of those guys. You look at guys like Aiden Hutchinson and Chase Winovich. I'm not saying Ernest Hausmann is going to be that good, but I'm saying he's going to be in a really good defense. Junior Colson's going to be there, and Junior Colson is a really good linebacker as well. So offensive lines, when they approach the second level, maybe sometimes they're going to be looking for Colson. Sometimes they're going to be looking for Hausmann. If they're looking for Colson, Ernest Hausmann's going to be able to free up. I think it's good for Ernest Hausmann to be able to have other good players on this Michigan defense that he can kind of bounce off of. I think he's going to come in and be a starting linebacker at the University of Michigan in 2023, and he's going to make a big-time jump in his sophomore season. Now, he'll make a big-time jump. I just don't know right away because he's a true sophomore. He's still got one more year. We might not see the full development until that junior year and just the star that Ernest Hausmann truly can be. I'm going to wrap this one up with Eric Gilbert. You watch his film at LSU, 2020, and that was the year after they lost a bunch of talent, right? 35 catches, 368 yards his freshman season. Eric Gilbert, 5-star player. He was a top 5 player in the country when he came out of high school. Eric Gilbert has all of the physical tools to become a great player in the Big Ten Conference. Eric Gilbert has all of the tools to be one of the best tight ends, maybe not just in the Big Ten, but in America. And he's going to have to block in this system. He's going to have to maybe do more than he was maybe used to doing at LSU or Georgia because of the physicality that Nebraska wants to bring in. But he has it. He has the potential to be a really big player. And I think Nebraska and this system is going to get the most out of Eric Gilbert. I don't think he's going to go for 1,000 yards because there's a lot of good receivers on this team as well. But Eric Gilbert, I think, is going to break out. And Eric Gilbert is going to make this Nebraska offense a lot better. And Eric Gilbert is going to be one of the biggest impact transfers in the Big Ten in 2023. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear who you think is going to be a big-time impact transfer in the Big Ten in 2023. Those 4 guys. Those are the guys that really stood out to me when I was looking at these transfer classes. I know there's a lot of other guys. I know at the quarterback you got Altmaier. I know you've got Hudson Card. I know you've got Cade McNamara, a Big Ten championship winning quarterback. I've done live streams. I've done videos talking about these transfer guys. Haven't mentioned a lot of Cade McNamara. I'm willing to say that. And it's because you look at he passed for just over 2,000 yards, 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions during the Big Ten championship season. I don't think I said it at the time, but I'm like, you look at, he's kind of a game manager, which is perfect for him at Iowa. They're not going to expect a lot out of Cade McNamara at Iowa. But when you look at really impact transfers, guys that can really lead their team to a few more wins, these 4 guys, Tanner Mordecai, Sean Tyler, Ernest Hausmann, Eric Gilbert, I believe are guys that can really move the needle. Maybe that's what I should have said. Move the needle for a lot of these football teams. More from Dave Valensky. Very much appreciate the super chat. Here's an idea for basketball. Have a week where you talk about teams in the Big Ten that are on the bubble. Yes, I could do that. Maybe as we get closer to tournament time, maybe I'll talk a little bit more basketball. I try to fit in a little bit more basketball because January it's talking a lot about there was coaching moves, there's transfer portal stuff, early signing day stuff. Now the signing day in February doesn't really mean as much. So before we get into maybe our spring previews, maybe I'll talk a little bit more basketball. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more basketball. I think I can throw in some hoops. But, just beware. I'm not able to watch these games kind of beginning to end like I was able to do in the football season. That's just kind of the way the schedule works out. But thank you very much, Dave, for the idea. And thank you very much for the super chat as well. Very much appreciated. Transfer portal. It's all about guys. If you're not a team, if you're not a Michigan, and if you're not at Ohio State, you need guys in the portal that can move the needle. These 4 guys can move. And there's going to be guys that's not going to be these 4 guys. There's going to be a guy in there that's going to be transferring into the right situation, and that's going to really stand out. I don't know who that guy is right now, but there is going to be a guy that's how it is. The transfer portal, man, you think you know which players are going to be really good. You think you got it all figured out. Old Big Ten Ted thinks he's got it all figured out until he doesn't. Okay, that's what happened with 8-4. I was picking Nebraska to go 8-4, instead they went 4-8. So that's kind of what happened over there. But yeah, those are kind of transfers that really stick out to me. I want to briefly mention, I want to talk about some other transfers here quick. I want to talk about a guy that I think can be good, but the situation's a little funky. I want to talk about Taven Jackson. Taven Jackson was a quarterback that went to Tennessee, and obviously Tennessee was loaded, right? You had Hendon Hooker, right? You had Milton, and now they're bringing in Nico, I can't pronounce his last name, at the number 1 quarterback in the country coming in this season. Quarterback room was full at Tennessee. You look at a 4-star guy in Taven Jackson, 6'3", 189. I think he can do a lot of different things right there with that team. Now he's transferring. He was from Greenwood, Indiana. He's transferring back to Indiana. The Indiana Hoosiers, and they needed a quarterback. Connor Bazelak entered the portal. He transferred to Bowling Green. You look at Taven Jackson, and I think this is a guy. Look, and then the cupboard's pretty bare at Indiana. That's the problem that you get with Taven Jackson. I watch him on film, and I say, that guy can play. Taven Jackson can play. And maybe this is a spark that Indiana needed. Right? They thought they had some answers at quarterback. It really didn't pan out, transfer portal or recruiting. But you look at Taven Jackson, a 4-star guy coming out of high school, local guy, young kid, going to be transferring in. He's got a couple of years to develop. Remember, they were rolling out Dexter Williams towards the end of last year, who was essentially a running back at quarterback. Crazy. I still don't know how they beat Michigan State. I don't know how they won the old brass spittoon in that game against the Spartans. That's one of the greater mysteries in life. One thing I want to do this offseason is kind of go back and rewatch some of these games from the football season, because that's one game I actually wasn't able to catch. I was not able to watch Indiana and Michigan State. Can't remember the reason. I'm sure I was working or doing something. I don't know. But I don't remember why I wasn't able to catch that. But, man, that sounded like a crazy game. So I got to go back. And watch that one. But, yeah, I believe Taven Jackson is – they've recruited pretty well the last few years at the wide receiver position. And maybe Indiana is a team that can get back to bowl eligibility. Maybe they can pull an upset. We'll see, but Taven Jackson is sure interesting at the quarterback position for the Indiana Hoosiers. Jason White, kind of segueing into my next thing. Storm Duck, what a name. What a name, Storm Duck. Cornerback at Penn State, big pickup. I did see that one. And Penn State, he's going to be a guy, I think, in that secondary. You look at Kalen King as well in the secondary for Penn State. This is going to be a good team, a good defense next season, as well as the offense is going to be really good too. But the defense, you look at Kalen King, you look at Storm Duck back there in the secondary. Got to find a way to kind of replace Jair Brown at safety for the Nittany Lions. But Penn State is doing really good things. 6'1", 205, Storm Duck, the transfer from North Carolina. I also think Dante Cephas is going to come in and be a big-time transfer. The transfer from Kent State, Dante Cephas and Malik McLean, both transferring in to Penn State, I think are going to be impact players. I'm going to do a video on this later at some point. I got to find the right time this off season to do it. But man, there's a really good possibility we could have 3 11-1 teams in the Big Ten tied, a 3-way tie for the Big Ten East title. Like, let's see if I remember the scenarios. Penn State would beat Michigan at home. Let's see. Michigan would beat Ohio State at home, right? Yeah, because they'll play in Ann Arbor. And then Ohio State in Columbus would beat Penn State. That is definitely not out of the realm of possibility. You look at the rest of their schedules, yeah, there's some tough games in there. Ohio State, got to go to Camp Randall, etc. You know, there's tough games throughout the rest of the Big Ten schedule. We know that. It's a deep league. But there's a possibility we have 3 11-1 teams at the top of the Big Ten East. Would it equal 3 Big Ten teams in the college football playoff? That remains to be seen. I'll probably do a video at some point, even though my Ohio State videos usually don't generate a ton of traffic. But I like to see Ohio State. They got to play Notre Dame at Notre Dame. Yeah, because they played in Columbus. It's a home and home. They got to play at Notre Dame. They got to play at Wisconsin. They got to play at Michigan. Ohio State, bringing in. I know they've got the dynamite wide receivers. They're fantastic, right? New quarterback, new stuff. This is still going to be a really good Ohio State team. This is still going to be a college football playoff contending Ohio State team, but you never know. So we'll see. But that's kind of my thoughts on that. There's a lot of good. I thought a lot of Big Ten teams really improved. I thought teams that I won't really get to this as the show progresses, so I guess I'll get to it now. When I look at teams that really didn't do themselves any favor, I talked about them before. I look at Purdue. Right, on the On3 rankings, they only brought in 3 transfers. Some players transferred out, like they brought in a defensive lineman and a safety from Arkansas, and then Hudson Card. Like, you know, it's not, and a lot of players kind of transferred out of the program. Of course, you look at what's happened with the quarterback position, King Daru as well, Kobe Lewis. So, you know, you look at Spencer Hostage, the offensive lineman that transferred to UCLA, Lawrence Johnson, in the defensive lineman in the middle that transferred to Auburn. It just wouldn't surprise me to see Purdue. I know I mentioned it before, and I'm not trying to rag on the Boilermakers here, but I think it's going to be a tough first year for Ryan Walters. I really believe that. The thing that could help them, and it happened last year in the spring transfer period for the Purdue Boilermakers, the thing that could help them is to go out and get a number 1 wide receiver. Okay, guys don't maybe like what's going on in spring ball with their respective team. Go out and get a number 1 wide receiver. I think guys like TJ Sheffield and Mershawn Rice can slot into a number 2, number 3, number 4 type of deal, but they need better receivers. They need better talent. I think Maccabee and Dylan Downing, I think, are going to be good in the running game. Defense has got to get better. But I trust Ryan Walters. I trust Kevin Kane to put together a good defense like they did at Illinois. So, you know, that's kind of where I'm coming from. With Branson Dean as well, transferring to Miami on the defensive line. It could be a tough year for the old Purdue Boilermakers. Ohio State is actually 13. They only picked up 4 transfers, but when you recruit the way they do, you don't really need to bring in a bunch of guys. You know, they actually brought in a quarterback, believe it or not, Trista Dieba, the transfer from Oregon State, going from one OSU to another. So Northwestern didn't really help themselves out. They only brought in 1 transfer. Maybe they can bring in more guys in the spring. Once again, things just not looking good right now in Evanston, Illinois. They're turning into a basketball school the way that team is playing on the court right now. I said it early on, okay? You got Cade McNamara and you got Eric All very early in the transfer process at Iowa. Okay? What's happened since then? A whole lot of nothing. This team has brought in just 5 transfers. Now, this is not a team. This is not a program. The Ferences aren't big on the transfer portal. We've seen that. They haven't done a lot when they should have in previous years. Okay, when you talk about the transfers that they brought in, Deacon Hill, like a backup quarterback right now. we'll see. I think one guy that could maybe step up, Charleston Southern wide receiver Seth Anderson, because they're going to need wide receivers to step up. Okay, you get Nico Reganey back. You get Deontay Vines back at wide receiver. You have some good receivers, but someone's going to need to step up, besides Eric All and Cade McNamara as well. Illinois, you got your quarterback. Michigan State, although they got 13 transfers, which is tied for the most in the Big Ten, ranked 9th in the Big Ten in their transfer portal class. I thought they started off pretty well. They were one of the top-ranked classes. There's some good players on this team right now at Michigan State. I just don't know. I mean, I turn around and look at this flag, and you look at the teams that are lined up right there in the East Division. At best, they're 4th. Okay, it seems like the East, and who knows if we're going to have the East past this season, but it seems like the East right now is just separating, with Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State being so good, especially now with where we're at with Penn State and what they're able to do now and the talent that they've brought in. Michigan State. I know Sparty fans want to prove that year to 2021 wasn't a fluke, but the more we kind of progress through this thing, then maybe these transfers are going to be able to do something. I thought they were a team that might that pursue a transfer quarterback. I really thought Peyton Thorne was, this past year without Kenneth Walker in that backfield. But you kind of look at the flag. Look at the East Division. Okay? They finished behind Maryland. Okay? They finished 5th in the East this year, I think. They finished just above Indiana and Rutgers, I believe. That's where they're competing. They're competing with Maryland. That's who they're competing with right now in the East. If this is the last year of the Big Ten East, Michigan State has kind of fallen back these last few seasons. They've fallen back the last few seasons. Dalton Debo chiming in. Iowa and Wisconsin for the West. Building the suspense. How the West will be won. Boy, that's the question that everybody wants to know. A lot of chatter, a lot of tweeting about who are the favorites in the Big Ten West, right? We've got Dalton Debo here saying Iowa and Wisconsin. I think those two teams are going to be really good. Even though Iowa hasn't done a bunch in the transfer portal, you got a quarterback that fits really well into the Iowa system. There's not going to be a lot of expectations on Cade McNamara. Caleb Johnson is going to be the workhorse of this offense. Okay, hopefully the O-line gets better. But this is a Iowa team that we know what you're going to get on defense. Phil Parker is going to put an elite defense out there. At the very least, he's going to put a great defense on the field in Iowa City. At the very least, that's what Phil Parker is going to do. Okay? And you look at this defense and what they have, especially in the secondary. Even though they're losing Riley Moss, even though they're losing Terry Roberts, this is still a defense that's going to be really good in the secondary. I look at Xavier Nwampa. You look at what he did in the bowl game. I think he's a player that's going to really burst onto the scene next season, a highly recruited kid. You look at Quinn Schulte, and then you look at Cooper DeJean, the turnover machine. I love what Iowa has. They're going to need to upgrade in the front seven a little bit. I don't think there's any question about that. But if there's one thing I know about Iowa is this is a developmental program. This is a program that's going to be able to take kids and they're going to be in the mix. That they are. They don't need a ton of more production at wide receiver. They just need guys that they can lean on every now and then, because we know tight end right, in Iowa City, Iowa. Okay, Luke Lachey, really good tight end. And when they had to split out Sam Laporta this year, Luke Lachey did a good job at tight end. And, of course, Eric All, the transfer from Michigan. I think this is going to be another good Iowa team. It will be a great Iowa team. That remains to be seen. When you look at Wisconsin, of course, they're going to be explosive. You look at the opposite when you look at Wisconsin as compared to the Iowa Hawkeyes. This is going to be an explosive team. What's going to happen on defense? I think that's a big question. You've got some players returning, but, Keanu Benton and Nick Herbig were such a big part of that defense for the Wisconsin Badgers. And now you don't have it. I believe in Luke Fickell. I believe in Mike Tressel. I believe in this defensive coaching staff for Wisconsin, that they can turn this thing around and that they can bring in and really improve this defense. But this is probably going to be an offensive team at Wisconsin. I'm intrigued to see how that's all going to go. But as you look at the rest of the Big Ten West, you got to talk about Minnesota. Okay? I know a lot of people are going to look at the Gophers and say, young quarterback. They're going to say, no Muhammad Ibrahim, losing some good players in the offensive line. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Minnesota's going to take a dip. I would not be so fast. I'd pump the brakes on that. I'm not going to sit here and say Ethan Kaliakmanis is going to be a top 5 quarterback in the conference. I'm just saying he's going to be good enough because Minnesota is surrounding him with talent, with Crooms, with Spencer, with Crabb coming back. There's talent with Sean Tyler coming in at running back. There's talent on this Minnesota team. There's talent in Minneapolis. They're going to be in the hunt. I don't know if they're going to win it, but they're going to be in the hunt. Illinois is an interesting team as well when you look at the Big Ten West. Just like nobody talked about them at the beginning of this last season, nobody's talking about them. I think you got a little bit of unproven commodity with Luke Altmaier. I think Luke Altmaier is going to be similar to Tommy DeVito. I think he's going to be a little bit of a notch better. They have some players that they can throw to. Isaiah Williams, Washington, Pat Bryant. The running game, this is like Brian Lenny Jr. This was a offense that was predicated on the success of Chase Brown, and I think a big example of that is what happened in the ReliaQuest Bowl against the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Okay, this is a team, once again, they're going to be in the hunt. There's a lot of teams. When you look at Minnesota, when you look at Illinois, you got to put Nebraska in there, right? I know there's a lot of potential. The P word is going to be prevalent. The offseason Kool-Aid is being downed in Lincoln, Nebraska. There's no question about that. But when you look at the players that they brought in, you can't help but say this is a team that might be in the hunt. I think the teams that won't be in the hunt, Purdue and Northwestern. I think those teams won't be in the hunt. I honestly believe, even though Wisconsin's good, even though Iowa's good, I think every other team's going to be in the hunt. I think every other team is going to have a chance to win the Big Ten West. That's how I feel about the Big Ten West. When you look at them, talking about more from Dalton Tebow about Illinois, I'm all about answering questions right now. Does Illinois running back return next year? Chase Brown, gonzo, so he's headed to the NFL. So what does Illinois have coming back? So when you look at the Illini, they were slated to have a 1-2 punch at running back this season. Okay, they were slated to have Chase Brown and Josh McCray. Okay, Josh McCray was pretty banged up. You got Reggie Love, who stepped up and was a good player. Okay, so you got Reggie Love, you got Josh McCray, excuse me. And we saw him running the bowl game, and it just wasn't the same. This was an offensive line that wasn't particularly great at Illinois this last season. And, I think Chase, what this Illinois team really reminded me of? This Illinois team really reminded me of Michigan State in 2021. You have an outstanding running back in the backfield, Kenny Walker, behind an offensive line that's not that great, but they were masked, and the issues on the offensive line was masked by the great ability in the backfield. Once again, look at what happened in the ReliaQuest Bowl. This was an offensive line in run blocking and in pass blocking that continued to get run over, that continued to lose battles in the trenches. Illinois wants to be a tough team. Brett Bielema wants them to be a tough team. Now, I'm not saying that they're not a tough team. Definitely not saying that. But this is a team that will be a defensive team. They're going to have to get better on the O-line. Are they going to throw the ball a lot more? I think there's going to be some changes in what Illinois is kind of going to do coming up this season up in 2023. But you can't say, what they have with Randolph and Johnny Newton both coming back on that defensive line. Oof. They still have some really good players on defense. I think Aaron Henry is also going to continue to do a great job as the defensive coordinator of the Illinois Fighting Illini. Some good questions there. just want to give, I talked before about Taven Jackson and some other players that are going to be coming into certain Big Ten programs that I didn't mention that are maybe in my main segments that are going to be really good players. But Wisconsin, we talked about Michigan State just now. Wisconsin has a guy, Jeff Petrowski, who was one of the better players on this Michigan State defensive line. I think when you talk about replacing Keanu Benton and you talk about replacing Nick Herbig, I think Jeff Petrowski is going to be one of those guys, the transfer from Michigan State. He was one of those players on the defensive line that, after all the stuff happened during the Michigan game, he kind of stepped up and was one of the main performers. So him transferring to Wisconsin, I think, will be a big deal for the Wisconsin Badgers. Good discussion here tonight on Big Ten Ted Live. So we're going to wrap. So I got my last segment to talk about. And also leave some thoughts in the chat. Some good stuff from Dalton Debo. Let's see. Jason White had a good one about Storm Duck. So if you want to talk about other things, you want to hear my thoughts on other things, make sure you leave those questions and whatever in the comments below. So as we continue on, so we talked about the teams. We've talked about what teams did well in the transfer portal. We've talked about what players are going to be an impact. We're all positive. We're upbeat on Big Ten Ted. I'm about to bring the mood down. I'm about to say what were some of the biggest losses in the transfer portal in the Big Ten Conference. The transfer portal giveth, and the transfer portal taketh away. We've heard that said many, many times. And this one's all about the latter. This one's all about the taketh away. What were some of the biggest losses in this transfer period window, in this transfer period, this first transfer portal period that has happened within the Big Ten? Because there were some. Okay, this is going to happen. You're going to lose guys that are important to your program. Eyabi Oki, very highly touted player coming out of high school. He actually transferred into Michigan. He's done a lot of moving. He's done a lot of transferring. Okay, 4.5 sacks this season. There were points in times this season where I thought, man, this guy, is maybe not this year because you had Mike Morris, you had Harold, you had other good experienced guys on the defensive line for Michigan. But, man, I thought maybe next year, man, Oki is going to be the guy. He could turn into a Hutchinson. He could turn into a David Ajabo. He had that type of talent. But then he goes and he enters the transfer portal. I think that's a big loss. I think that's what maybe motivated Michigan to get a little bit more on defense with guys like an Ernest Hausman in the transfer portal. But this is a big loss for Michigan. Okay, I think he was slated to be one of the top pass rushers. I think he was slated to be one of the top defenders for the University of Michigan, following some coaches over to the University of Charlotte, where he will likely finish his college football career. It's a big loss. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a program-changing loss because it's Michigan. They're one of the best programs in all of college football right now. But I believe Eyabi Oki was a guy that could turn into an elite type of talent like a Hutchinson, like a Winovich, like a David Ojabo. So big loss for Michigan. My next one I'm going to talk about isn't a single player. It's a multitude of player. It's the Iowa Exodus. Because, man, there's some good – I'm going to list off a lot of good players right here that are transferring out of this Iowa football program. Okay, let's talk about them. Terry Roberts, Gavin Williams, Arlen Bruce, Justin Jacobs, Keegan Johnson. Oof. Those are some look at Keegan Johnson and Arlen Bruce on offense. For a team that is in desperate need of receivers, in desperate need of talent on the perimeter, to have Keegan Johnson, probably he would have been your number one receiver this last season, and he definitely would have been the number one receiver in 2023. And you look at the guy that stepped in for him, Arlen Bruce, that's sitting right there. Like, man, it's tough right now. Those are two tough losses. And you look at the linebackers that they lost to graduation. You look at Jack Campbell. You look at Seth Benson, two of the best linebackers that the University of Iowa has ever seen. Justin Jacobs was probably slated to pop right into that role. and be one of the top linebackers, but he end up and transfers to Oregon. It really, I mean, Iowa is what they have and the tradition they have on defense. It's a little bit of a head scratcher. Maybe it says more about the Iowa program as a whole, but a little bit of a head scratcher why you have defensive players hopping in the portal. Terry Roberts is, he probably would have been, I'm trying to think in my head, but he probably would have been in the starting lineup at corner this season. Okay, he played a big part in maybe some nickel packages and other parts in terms of the depth of the secondary this past season. But then again, when you look at the secondary, you look at Xavier Nwampa, you look at Quinn Schulte, you look at Cooper DeJean. This is going to be a secondary that's going to have a lot of good players still coming back to this Iowa football team. So maybe that's why Terry Roberts. But he's a talented kid. Gavin Williams, once again, not a star, but once again, depth. We're talking about depth for a program that historically hasn't been great in utilizing the transfer portal. This is a big handful of losses for Iowa. I especially look at those wide receivers. Deshaun McCullough at Indiana. Indiana didn't have a lot of bright spots last season, I'll say that. But one of the bright spots was a highly recruited player, Deshaun McCullough, local kid, 49 tackles, 4 sacks, in his true freshman season. This was a guy that showed a lot of talent. And he's one of these guys that showed a lot of talent and said he looked around the rest of the locker room and said, we ain't going nowhere. I'm going to somewhere bigger and better where I can accomplish some things. And that's exactly what he did, entering his name into the transfer portal and then transferring to Oklahoma. Like I said, one of the very few bright spots for Indiana football this last season. Indiana had one of the worst defenses. And this loss, they're probably going to continue to struggle on the defensive side of the football without Deshaun McCullough. Okay, without that pass rushing threat that they had. You had a local kid, really good talent. That's the type of talent you need to try to bring home, or keep home, I should say. They brought him home, right, that 1 year. But you need to be able to keep him home. That's a big-time loss for Indiana. I want to hear what you guys think. Who do you think were some of the biggest losses in the Big Ten transfer portal period as well? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Who you think were some of the biggest departures in the Big Ten? Yeah, there's a lot of, you're looking at Iowa. We got a comment here from Sunshine Design saying Iowa's going to take a step back. Hate to say it. It seems that way. If you retain Brian Ferentz, everybody's favorite, if you retain Brian Ferentz, it's probably not going to go well. This is not going to be an offense that's going to really go up and down the field that much. You look at Cade McNamara, everybody's excited about Cade McNamara. And I will say this, Cade McNamara is an upgrade at the quarterback position for Iowa. Nobody's doubting that. I'm not doubting that. A lot of people aren't doubting that. Okay? But, and there's always a but you look at the system he's in. I think Caleb Johnson's a good running back. I just don't know if he's 1,000, 1,500-yard guy. I just don't know. I don't think so. I think he's good. I think he showed flashes in his first season last season. But then you put more pressure on Cade McNamara. Look what happened in the playoff against Georgia when you put pressure on Cade McNamara. Okay? Got his job taken. Won a Big Ten title, got his job taken away from him. I think he's going to fit into the Iowa offense, and I'm not sure if that's a compliment. I'll just put it that way. There's a lot of teams. I talked about the Big Ten West before. A lot of teams out there in the Big Ten West that are making moves. Wisconsin's making moves. Nebraska's making moves. Maybe a step below them. Minnesota's making moves. There are teams in the Big Ten West that are improving. And Illinois might just slot in there as a consistent 7 to 8 win type of football team. Okay, Illinois, I think they're still going to be really good on defense. Like Iowa has the ability to be in contention. I think Iowa has the ability, because of their defense, Iowa has the ability to go to the Big Ten Championship next season. They also have the ability to finish 5th in the division. That's how I see it. It's going to be interesting. A lot of guys on that front seven gone from the University of Iowa. A lot of guys gone. How are the Hawkeyes going to come back and really stake their claim to things? So that's going to be a big question for that. I think that'll wrap things up here for today's live program. All kinds of transfer stuff across the Big Ten Conference. Quick reminder, if you haven't already, great time to subscribe. Lots of off-season content here on the channel. Got a lot of ideas lined up as we continue to progress through this off season. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Big Ten Ted Live tonight. For those of you that celebrate Happy Hockey Day weekend here in Minnesota, we'll see you out in White Bear Lake. Until next time, I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.